How did crypto bros become such a powerful political force?
They should not be subject to the same regulation as banks.
Why is the right considered today's counterculture?
They're all way better than this!
When did clean energy become too lip-coated?
Confront the climate crisis.
Just some of the stuff we explore in the Culture Lab, the marvelous mad science of how the zeitgeist shapes our politics. Hosted by data scientists and pollsters, Kyla Van Ellenfitch and Gabe DeRoche. Join every week as they bring together data, their own insights, and a special guest to put a different loaded question under the microscope. Culture Lab, a brand new podcast from Air Quotes Media, creators of Curse of Politics, The Hurly Burly, and Hotel Pacifico. Subscribe now.
Greetings, you happily miserable accursed. It's Hurley here, leading off with a plug for a new Air Quotes Media podcast, Culture Lab, the marvelous mad science of how the zeitgeist shapes our politics. The trailer we ran off the top gives you all the goods. Subscribe now. The debut pod is February the 18th. You're not going to want to miss that, especially if you're a young'un, like Scott. All right. It's Curse of Politics time. Scott and I have a new conservative strategist with near perfect hair to play with. Fred Delory is here. Good to see you, Fred.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right. Jordan's off this week. She's in a part of the Costa Rican jungle where the internet is spotty, i.e. not my brother's place. But the champagne is still somehow in abundance. Again, not my brother's place. But Fred comes to us fresh off the plane after helping Rob Lance become the next premier of Prince Edward Island, winning the PC leadership out there. Former national campaign manager for Aaron O'Toole, major campaign operative for Stephen Harper and Doug Ford. And if I can cross-pollinate my podcast here, he'll become a 3-time Hurly-Burly guest later today. That's how much we goddamn love fucking Fred Delory, right? We cannot get enough Fred Delory, right? Do you like him, Scott?
No. And I was waiting when we get to that part. Yes, of course I like Fred. Fred and I don't really know each other very well, so I'm really looking forward to this. I mean, I've watched Fred, I listen and I read Fred. Fred writes now and then. I enjoy everything he writes, so
right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But we don't know each other. We haven't we haven't gone to the cottage together. We don't text from Boston and Montreal together. We're not, we're not Russian and Canadian. But I'm looking forward to this. I'm hoping
Fred used to do that.
Will be correct.
Fred did through the federal election. I think Fred did the Mansbridge show.
Yes, yeah. Bruce Anderson, Peter, and I did it. That was fun.
This is not the Mansbridge show.
No, I can swear here, and I am looking forward to that. I just don't. I'm hopeful I don't go too far. So maybe I'll end up not doing it all by being.
Yeah, that's right. You can if you go too far, right? You can never go too far because Reed will match you move for move. All right, here's what we're talking about this week: the Harper Palooza in Ottawa last week. I mean, Canada's new national auto strategy, and our curse clipping is from Alex Boutillier at Global News on Jivani Solo Mission. How do you say this last name? Jivani.
Beautifully done. I don't think any of those words.
It's not in my script. It's not in my script. Rosenberg fucked me. It's not in my script, so I thought it was going to come along right there. Anyway, he was on a solo mission to Washington.
Mad Bunny, I think he's known as. So,
thanks for making me laugh, Scott. And then the magnificent Mr. Pinsent will bring in what I expect might be an emotional round of Hey Yous. Please stay tuned for that. So last week was all Stephen Harper all the time in Ottawa. There was a gathering of the Klan for the unveiling of his portrait. And then they had a big celebration of the 20th anniversary of the 2006 win. It's kind of interesting because just a week later, there had been another gathering of the Klan out in Calgary. I think it was a slightly different Klan, and they talked about slightly different things. And that's part of what interests me in this conversation today. It's also the case, though, that Stephen Harper had a very, very clear message for, I think, his party, all parties, but his party included, about the threat from the United States and the way Canada needed to approach that. And it stood in pretty stark contrast to Pierre Poilievre not mentioning that subject in his speech to the Conservative Convention in Calgary. So I think there's lots to pick away at there. But Fred, you were probably around for most of last week at the Conservative things. What's your takeaway about what it means politically?
Well, it was one of my favorite high school reunions that I've been to. It was amazing to see so many old friends that I forgot existed at times. Right? There's you meet so many people in politics, and you worked with them for a decade. I was there for the entire Harper era, from opposition to right to the very end. And there's so many people that touch your lives, and after an election, you guys know what it's like. Everyone just disperses around the country, and you lose touch. And so it was amazing to see.
Unless you're me and David, in which case you just spend every day together drinking rum and lamenting choices you
No,
made in the third week of the campaign in
yeah, I'm not
2006.
saying right. Different anniversary for you folks. But look, the big takeaway for me, like listening to the Prime Minister, to Harper speak, and what he accomplished during his 10 years, and then what came after it, was such a contrast. And the situation we're in now, it's like, damn, why didn't we try harder in 15 and try to stop the changes that came? That was the big takeaway. But your point about the convention in Calgary before, I was there as well. So I've been on the road for like 10 straight days. It feels like I'm home today for the first time in a while. And the Calgary convention was a very different vibe than the Harper era, Harper-palooza, as you called it before, David. The convention was very youthful in so many ways. There was a lot of young people there. I'd never seen that before. And I've been to conventions for all parties as observers. There was a real youth energy at the Conservative convention in Calgary that I'd not seen before. But what you said about Harper said about unity and Trump, and that Pierre didn't say, I found that striking as well. I was there. I was on CBC at the time, commenting on it. And I felt that was a missed opportunity in so many ways for Polyev to really get into the number one question that we as Canadians are worried about. He's not on that battlefield necessarily right now. There's been hints of it here and there. And I know a lot of the conservative strategists will all say, well, we have our it's affordability, crime, focus on those things. But if you're not on the number one battlefield that everyone's talking about, we're just missing so many opportunities just to show people we're engaged and know what's going on.
Hey, can I ask a superficial question, Fred? Because
Sure.
I thought the thing, it looked so impressive, like as an event. I was really like, hats off, right? It looked, whoever was in charge of putting the week and the events together. You're on mute, David, which is just the way we like it.
Sorry, the Harper week you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, our week, David. The way that we sat and watched the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. It was so beautifully produced. No, I wanted to ask you, like, of all those events, what was the funnest? What was the was it his speech, or was there like a big drink up? Was there a private after party that people don't know about? Like, dish, man, dish.
Look, the gala dinner, which is funny to say Harper gala dinner given his aversion to galas. But that was where you saw everyone. That's where you like so many people I had not seen in so long, and you're like you have these memories of these people. You've been in the trenches with them, and I've lost touch over the decade when we were out of government. So that was it was the big one where you had 500 people that had worked so closely together from different parts of the Harper era. That was the big thing. There was no wild party that I was at. I was, in and out of town, traveling. I'd ride from Calgary here for a few days and then went to the Maritimes for a few days. So may have missed some of the wild stuff, but yeah.
You didn't go out and throw any potatoes at a wall by any chance, did you?
I did not, and I don't know that reference.
It's an inside joke. Only about 10 people are going to get it, but they're going to laugh. So consider this ad a sort of bridge between the impressive sovereign AI feature-driven messages I've been downloading here on behalf of our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and why a strong, true, real digital sovereignty strategy is so important in the first place, and how the government's Buy Canadian policy fits into this. We'll be talking about that for the next few weeks. And, editor's note, the adjectives strong, true, and real were chosen purposefully. All right, do we have our bearings then? Good. Here's the context and the crux of it. Our once predictable trading relationships are undergoing seismic change. We know this. Man, do we know it. So, among other adaptations, Canada needs to invest in itself, shore up or build domestic capacity from the ground up, with Canadian partners first. That's why the Fed's introduced the Buy Canadian policy, designed to help make our economy stronger, more resilient to global shocks, and support our own workers and businesses. It applies to all kinds of sectors, including Canadian technology, the biggest emerging market of which is AI. That's it for the context. Here's the crux. With the word sovereignty occupying so much mind space, there needs to be ironclad alignment on what precisely qualifies as truly Canadian, a robust definition, and a set of enforced standards. Consistency is key, particularly when it comes to AI infrastructure. I'll have more on that next week. But in the meantime, know this. TELUS is proud to be an owned and controlled, end-to-end, sovereign Canadian brand. Their AI factory built upon a foundation of security, sovereignty, and Canadian values. You know, I like the portrait. Unlike
Yeah.
Paul's, it's a really nice portrait of a slim version of Stephen Harper. Unlike Paul's, which is a nice portrait of a slim version of Brian Mulroney.
It's strange.
Doesn't look anything like him.
No.
Harper's at least looks like him. But anyway, Scott, what were you thinking about? What do you think Harper was thinking when he gave that speech? Because, you know, if you watched the week's events,
Right.
you wouldn't necessarily know whether he preferred Mark Carney or Stephen Harper or Pierre Poilievre to be the next prime minister, but you would probably suspect it was Carney.
Yeah, you might. I thought a couple things. First of all,
I mean, he's too partisan for that to be true, but just intellectually, right?
Right. The coherent thread of what he was saying leads you to, like, connects more to Carney, I would say, than at least what Poilievre has had to say so far. I just want to start by saying again, like, this is a mixed anniversary for me and David, right? And for me personally. So I watch it, but I have to say I sincerely came away because I've gotten to be good friends with so many people that worked around Mr. Harper. I remember very fondly when Paul had his portrait unveiling, I think, as I mentioned last week. And I just thought, I don't know, I found myself watching this stuff and not being, for one of the rare times in my life, absolutely filled with bitterness and resentment. So I thought, you know, wow, hats off. But it was beautifully executed and composed. All the events I thought looked serious. It looked smart. It was well put together, and it was just an impressive string of events. So I think whoever was in charge of logistics and the production of that thing really deserves a big props. I watched what Harper had to say, and I had two thoughts. One, the obvious thing, which is he is willing to speak out on this issue in a way that Poilievre has not. And I mean, that's undeniable. And in particular, he says two things that are immediately, like, in direct contradiction to what Poilievre has been saying and the Conservative Brain Trust saying, because he said, one, match them tariff for tariff. Right. He said that in the past, but he reiterated, and he chose to reiterate that. And that is a hell of a thing to say. Because.
But nobody in Canadian politics has been as direct as Stephen Harper has, that this battle for independence from the United States is going to cost us money.
That's right.
Right.
And
that we have to make sacrifices. We need to be prepared to make sacrifices. And those sacrifices are worth it. I've not heard the PM say that, really. No. And I've not heard anybody else really say that. But Harper said it from the beginning.
I want to patch that aside for a second, because I want to come back to that point, because that's really where I wanted to land. So the two things to me that he was going to say: match them tariff for tariff. And two, we have to stand up. We have to be declarative in denouncing Trump's aggression and hostility, and there was no qualification or equivocation on that. And those two things stand in complete contradiction to what Poilievre has been saying. Now, I want to be sympathetic to Poilievre. I think two things, one of which I'm sympathetic. One is the thing that I'm sympathetic about is your point, David. Nobody else has been this declarative either. No one else has come out and said, in the current, like, neither Poilievre nor Carney, nor even Doug Ford, who said, I'm going to shut off the electricity, and then 2 days later turned tail completely.
Not even Don Davies.
No, no one has been that declarative. And this is the freedom of being a former, right? I mean, he has the freedom to not have to worry about the voter coalition that he has or the voter coalition that he hopes to have. He doesn't have to worry about how the general population of the country digests a message from its current or would-be leader saying, it's going to get hard. It's going to take some skin out of you. And that's inevitable. It might even be necessary, and go ahead and do it. That is a luxury that a former prime minister has, that someone who's not competing for office can say that. So I do think whether it contrasts most dramatically with Poilievre, but it also contrasts with anybody that's in electoral politics. It is a luxury that a former leader who doesn't have to worry about accruing votes and has the freedom and the range to be able to say, I'm going to absolutely, without fear, break it all down. The reason I'm unsympathetic is that I think that Poilievre hasn't yet decided what the formula is. And I find it puzzling that they haven't. And by formula, I mean, like, what is it? What is his unmistakable? You don't have to think about it. You don't need someone to describe it and explain it to you for 30 minutes. What's his construct on Trump? Because as Fred says, there have been hints here and there. Like there have been, he'll say something in the middle of a speech now and then, or pressed in the middle of the campaign because he wasn't saying enough. He did come out and say, but in Calgary, it felt like it was a topic to be avoided. What is the least that we can say in order to get past this conversation? And it felt to me like it wasn't just a strategic choice of, well, this isn't in our interest because we wish to focus on affordability. That's our issue set. I think there's also, they must know that they have to have a formula on this, if for no other reason than to tell caucus members and activists and people that are on television and in media, people who might have an influence, say, what's my script? Like, what's my concept? What are my 3 beats on Trump and the conservative? How does it all hang together? I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to say. Am I supposed to say something patriotic? Do I blame it on Ottawa? Do I go hard at Trump? And you see it all over. When we get to talk about Jivani, you can see here's clearly got no script that has been established by the conservatives powers that be. So I'm sympathetic in the sense that Harper has the freedom to say things that others do not and cannot. I'm less sympathetic that I think Poilievre has yet to figure out what the formula is, and they're struggling with it, and he's got to stop struggling with it. He's got to settle on a formula so that he can. Because to me, that's the path to putting this question beside you. Just go, listen, you know what I had to say. I have A, B, and C. Now, fuck on off until something significant happens and you can ask me for a refresh on it. But for now, that's all you're going to get out of me. And then I'm going to go back to affordability. But he doesn't have that first part. He doesn't have the block to get to his bridge, and use classic media training language. And I thought that was in sharp relief given Harper's statements.
So, faithful listeners will by now have heard me say that if you have something, it probably made its way to you by train. That statement is now in the if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times category, because it's true. The last few miles, though, are another matter. That part of the trip often happens by truck. And yes, our sponsor CN is in the trucking business too. The fact is, CN ships door to door, from loading dock to destination. Here's how it works. Say you have a shipment to move. Food, manufactured goods, raw materials, whatever. CN will dispatch a vehicle from its dedicated truck division, CNTL, to you. It will also supply the appropriate container for your cargo. The CN truck will move your container to the nearest intermodal terminal. That's the name for specialized containers. And load it onto the train. Same story at the other end. The container arrives, is picked up by another CN truck, and is delivered to the customer or to a sea vessel for further journey. It works in sync, optimized by CN technology. Simple, integrated, smooth, and worry-free. No juggling different carriers or chasing tracking updates, and it all happens under rigorous security. CN provides layered security, meaning surveillance, secure terminals, and advanced monitoring. From any point in Canada, the US, or Mexico to any other point on the continent. No hassles, no handoffs, no surprises, door to door, and CN moves cargo on time. Count on it. Well, I wonder if you try to game it out where this all ultimately goes, because um, I see people saying on social media that Carney was elected to get a deal with the Americans. But I think it was broader than that, Fred. I think Carney was elected to manage the Canadian economy in the face of the American threat, which may or may not include getting a deal with the Americans. Um, and in the absence of any position on this, um, are the conservatives going to end up where, frankly, the big business community is in the country right now, arguing that there must be a CUSMA, um, that there is no economic strategy for Canada without CUSMA? Because, I mean, they're not endorsing the Carney pivot, and they're not even endorsing the intellectual framework behind the Carney pivot. So that leaves them with, we got to fix what was broken here in North America. And to me, that feels like a trap, Fred.
Are we even saying that? Like, are you hearing conservatives saying we need CUSMA? Like, I don't even know if that's the plan.
No, I
To
don't. I'm
Scott's
just trying
point,
to
there
game
is
out
no.
where their positioning on this takes them, right? And if you're not if you're not pivoting away from the US, then you're digging deep down into the US, right?
Yeah, look, I think what they're doing is hoping that something gets resolved and no one's talking about it anymore, and we're just talking about affordability and crime. I think that seems to be the plan. Hope that the issue set changes, and then the number one issue is no longer the number one issue,
Right.
which of course we all know is a disastrous strategy and not a way to run a campaign. If we go this spring, the numbers are what they are, and they're not at all good, and we're not on the battlefield. So I don't know if like hope that we can get a year or two later into this parliament before we go, and then maybe the issue set will change. Maybe there'll be a deal so that we don't talk about this. Now I don't know what Canadians will ever accept as a deal because, or Trump himself, because you could sign a deal and the next day you could tear it up. So I think the Kuzma and that whole narrative, I don't know if that fits for anyone either. Like make a deal. What's the deal with this guy? How does
Right.
that stick? So look, I think the conservatives need to come up with some kind of messaging to Scott's point to say this is our position on this and to show Canadians that you are aware of the number one issue that is concerning people.
So let's just stick with you for a second and drill down into why this might not be happening. Because when people aren't doing something in politics that seems obvious, there's often a very good reason. And so it isn't that they're conservative, because we've just been talking about Stephen Harper giving great voice to this. I had Jason Kenney on the Hurley Burley. He talked about this in a way. I said to him, if Polyev could talk like this, he'd be the prime minister right now, if he could talk about Canada this way.
Mhm.
So it's not a conservative thing. We are all assuming it is a management of vote thing, and that it's that rural, really conservative, pro-Trump vote that he's trying to manage, that he doesn't want to lose to a separatist splinter group or to the PPP or wherever they might go to cast their protest vote. So that's a real serious political management issue. Nobody would understand that better than you, having tried to manage that coalition through the O'Toole thing. So is there a path, in your view, for holding those votes and expressing what Canadians want to hear about Trump in the United States?
Well, yeah, look, I have scars on my back and chest from that whole 21 campaign with the PPC and holding the Conservative coalition together. It is an immense challenge. And I think Corey actually made a point last week that I thought was really good on that here on the curse when he talked about that room in Calgary. I was there hoping that he would say it, and I would just, maybe applaud, but maybe others in the room would have booed if he took on in some way. And he was, right after Polyev spoke, we went to vote on whether he stays as leader. And he had the numbers and he had to be strategic in that regard. All that mattered for that night was that speech to that room. It wasn't a national audience. It wasn't to all Canadians and all conservatives necessarily, but just the delegates in the room. I myself, again, was hoping to hear stuff on that, but it wasn't really going to impact how I voted. But could impact what others did if he went the other way. But now that that's out of the way, he is the leader of the party. He's won the leadership review. Maybe we'll start seeing something. We did see some cooperation in the last week. They came out and said that they'll help pass the GST cut, something that they have not been overly cooperative with in this parliament. So we'll see if that's how they adjust. And I when it comes to the communications on this, I think he's got to find that way. Maybe he doesn't have to use the Trump name, but talk about the issue, talk about where we are, and that could be a way where he tries to thread the needle here, where he does keep the everyone in the tent happy, but at the same time, making sure the rest of Canada is aware that we know what this issue is.
Scott, the other part of his job that's difficult is that it implies not blaming Carney every time something goes wrong.
Right.
Right. Because sometimes you have to blame Trump for something going wrong. And that's a tricky thing also for an opposition leader to do, which is to decide when to lay off the prime minister because it's going to look like you are on the wrong side of a fight. That's not a very usual circumstance.
I think that's a significant consideration, and also a bit of an emotional one, right? I think there's a desire, a conviction there saying, well, we're not going to let this guy off. I mean, we think that he's the architect of this. And more to the point, what you really hear from activists is, well, it's a consequence of 10 years of liberal darkness and, where the whole country went into like a woke cave. And now, listen, this is what we have to deal with. I think that's more imagined than real, though. I know I know there's a sincere balance to be struck there, but I don't think it's as hard as you might think. And I don't think it's as hard as conservatives think. And I don't think they're giving or ceding as much ground as they might imagine when they resist on that just out of instinct. I think that you can, and I think, frankly, if you want to be prime minister, you're going to have to be absolutely unequivocal and convincing on your commitment to Canada and your defense of Canada against Trump's aggressions, against his unfair and unfounded aggressions. And then I think you can pivot and criticize and say, here's what I would do differently, or this is how I would pursue this. I don't think that means you have to say, and the prime minister's off the hook. And I think that construct, it's what I talk about when I say literally, and I mean it this way, I'm speaking from a comms perspective, a formula, a 3-beat formula. Right? What is the necessary element? What are the necessary elements of that formula? Well, you have to have the convincing statement of patriotism. You have to have a denunciation of Trump and probably be maybe more specific. Liberals can get away with just denouncing him on brand. You're going to have to denounce specific actions so that, because those actions are uniquely indefensible in terms of economic aggressions and aggression for territorial takeover. That's something where 90% of people are, even conservatives. And then you have your last beat is what you would do differently or what your storyline is on that. And then you're pivoting back to what your stuff is. So they can construct that. They just haven't. I want to bring up an issue you brought up last week, David, and you've mentioned this before in a bunch of places, and that is how seized you seem to be with an issue. Like you've said it, that the way you've pronounced on it is when Poilievre does speak out against Trump, it feels forced and manufactured. You don't feel like his heart is in it. And like in the same way that when Justin Trudeau would talk about the economy, you're like, somebody said to him, look, we can't get through the fucking day without talking about the economy. You're like, well, it's never been my thing, but all right, fine. I'll go out there and mouth some words phonetically into a microphone. And I think that that's an issue that, for all his raw political talent, Poilievre has got to deal with. And it's not just on Trump. Like, he's now affixed this label of hope to himself. Right? You notice his scrum the other day, he comes out and he goes, well, what do Canadians, he started with it, right? Canadians need hope. And then the cabinet minister's walking by and he goes, they don't represent hope. But that he's talking about hope. But I feel like when he says hope, it's just a talking point. Like, I don't feel like he's not leaning into it. So when he talks about the grievances that his voter coalition feels, when he's talking to that convoy crowd, there is no questioning that is coming from a deeply personal place, and he summons and channels their anger in a serious way. Okay. Now you've got to do the same thing on Trump, and and if you're going to pick up on this thing of hope, you're going to have to find a way to convincingly communicate about those, because those things, when he speaks about those things, it feels like he's just mouthing words, and he's going to have to up his game. And this is a guy who, if you're not supposed, Jesus, if we can't get outstanding political communication from the guy, then what's the case for Pierre Poilievre? That's supposed to be his bread and butter, but he's got to get better on those things.
It hasn't been too long since I put industrial carbon pricing in the window on behalf of our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute. About a couple of months. But the policy hit the news again recently So it's worth reminding you loyal listeners why industrial carbon pricing is so important. It's the single most important tool Canada has to drive meaningful emissions cuts as we maintain our competitiveness and keep costs low for business. We're talking really, really low, Timbit low, meaning in the oil and gas sector, for example, it adds about the price of one single Timbit to each barrel of oil, 30 cents. And that's a conservative estimate, by the way. Costs are likely even lower, which is by design, of course. Industrial carbon pricing is meant to protect economic competitiveness and at the same time create big incentives for low carbon investment. So, costs low, but investment incentives high when it's working right. Aye, there's the rub, to quote the bard. Right now, industrial carbon pricing is not working to its full potential, and the federal government is considering ways to fix it. The Climate Institute has made a formal submission on precisely that. It's called Outcomes, Not Optics. Canadian carbon markets need bold reform to be effective. Not surprisingly, because the Institute is the leading authority on this file, publishing more original research than anyone else, it's full of new, detailed, and scrupulous modeling. And it offers 4 recommendations so decision makers can make targeted changes to bring the policy up to strength. You can read all about it at climateinstitute.ca. So let's take this to the next step, which is, I think, in the auto thing. Fredo, I think one of the things that I'm curious about as I watch this unfold is against Trudeau, it was only necessary to point out the flaws in things. Prices are too high, taxes are too high, crime is too high, and you were the obvious answer to those. And the Conservatives were the obvious answer to those questions. But in this post-Trump, post-Carney world, Carney is carving out an alternative theory for the country economically, which we most recently saw in the auto deal, which, as near as I could tell, was big 3. It's over between us. We're now suing you to get money back, and you can go fuck yourself. And we're talking to Asians now about automobiles, right? And we're hoping that Asians are going to come in here, Koreans and Chinese, and build automobiles. But you, big 3, give us our money back and go fuck off. You're knuckling under Trump and you're going to the States, and that's the future. So that was the latest of the Carney kind of everything's going to be different piece. And it makes me wonder, I mean, the old adage, it's not old, it's an adage for a reason, is that opposition parties don't have to propose policy, and it can often get them in a lot of trouble when they do propose policy. But I do wonder whether the Conservatives don't need to have a counterpoint to Carney's economic thesis, or whether it's just enough to talk about affordability, or do you have to have a little bit more sophisticated theory about how the economy is going to work if you're become the PM?
Yeah, look, I think Poilievre's big part of his mantra has been very similar to the situation we're in right now about getting our products to market, right? Getting pipelines built, doing that sort of thing. So he doesn't have to really pivot on that or have new policies necessarily. But I think the biggest opportunity I see for Poilievre on this front is, Carney's been prime minister for about 10, 11, well, the election was about 10 months ago, and one bill has passed parliament, just one bill. Things aren't actually getting built or done here at a very fast level. I think there's room for the Conservatives to actually be cooperative and take wins on this. The GST cut that they said that they would support, they should come out and say, we're getting this done. The Conservatives are getting this done, because Carney has not, he's really good at giving speeches, really good at putting out statements, but actually doing the work, it's going to be the Conservatives that could do. I think that's the opportunity the party has. And again, with Carney not making any friends in the House, we're no party other than the odd floor crosser that he's getting. There's an opportunity there, I think, for the Conservatives to come out and look like statesmen if they can do that, if they can stay mature and not get too clownish when they do that, and too over the top and keep referencing Trudeau all the time, which I myself have a tendency of doing, but I'm not running for prime minister.
I think they would be very wise to cooperate on a couple of things, because that would smash to smithereens any attempt by the government to call an election on the basis of blockage, right, and obstruction. And I think that that's the only fig leaf the government would have for an election this spring, and the Conservatives should not give it to them.
Agree. And I don't even think they like, we talk about the Liberals looking for an excuse to call an election. I think make it so they don't even have a reason to, that they don't want to. Because if they're governing, and you guys have been in that seat before, when you're governing, and it's this tight and the world is this volatile, elections
You never
are
know what's going to
scary.
happen.
They're
You never know
scary,
what's going
right?
to
I don't
happen.
think the Liberals want, I know the polls are really good for them right now, but if I was sitting in the PMO right now, I still would not want an election because anything can happen in that. But if nothing is happening, if nothing is getting through the House, if committees are being stalled, if the Bloc and the Conservatives, who have a majority, are blocking everything, well, then you actually do have to have an election, because what's the point if you can't get anything done?
Scott, is there any politics in this auto strategy that we saw unveiled last week? I'm unconvinced that the auto industry has much political chops, frankly, in Ontario. I know it's historically a massive industry in the province, but it isn't really anymore. Parts is, but assembly isn't that much. And I remember that when, speaking of the Harper government, when they bailed out the auto companies in the financial crisis, that was wildly unpopular with the general public. They did that in spite of public opinion, not because of public demand.
Right. And as you said a moment ago, when you're setting up the context for all of this, it's not as though the auto companies are playing cards that provide anything appealing to the Canadian government or any Canadian political party that aspires to be in government. So what's there to work on? I mean, I'll pick up on the last thing you guys said, because I just want to fiercely agree. Like, I think it's really important. The GST rebate, I think, was tactically very smart to agree to do it for the reasons that you guys have just articulated. Remove the rationale of a congested house where nothing can pass. I think it would be smart to pick one other issue, probably give another dump. There's some urgency around that issue, so really make it as hard as possible for the Liberals that they wish to contemplate. If there's a boardroom somewhere at Langevin where people are arguing around the table going, Prime Minister, like, I know you're anxious. I know you feel like the polls could turn, but we are not going to get a better opening and things could get worse. So let's go this April, May. Like, let's call this thing for June. This is the case for doing it. Let us do that. Argument is going to be much harder for whoever is making it to win if the Conservatives throw another log on the cooperation fire. And so I just think that makes a lot of sense. Although
I think it's tough, by the way, for the Liberals to make that argument anyway, because
I think it is
nobody
also
out there in the public knows what goes on in committees.
right.
And I think to a casual observer of Ottawa, does Mark Carney look encumbered? Does it look like Mark Carney's having trouble doing what he wants to do? Does it look like he's not in charge of the government? Like, I think that would be almost a laughable notion if you put that forward right now.
The following message is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Not all nicotine products carry the same risk. Smoke-free alternatives, like heated tobacco, vaping products, and nicotine pouches, don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. While not risk-free, evidence shows they have the potential to be significantly less harmful than cigarettes. Yet, Canadian regulations restrict access and limit communication about these alternatives, keeping adult smokers in the dark. Sweden has accepted this science, embraced smoking harm reduction, and driven smoking rates below 6%. Canada has the tools to do the same, but it requires political will. It's time to align regulation with science, expand access to smoke-free products, and empower Canadians to make informed choices. The evidence is clear. The opportunity is real. Canada can be smoke-free. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
I'd watch for whether the Liberals attempt to really draw the budget and implementation bill into the center of political discourse, which is hard to do. Nobody wants to talk about an implementation bill. But if they start to build that thing into a test of whether or not Canada and Parliament, in the context of American hostility is functioning, then that tells you that maybe they're moving toward trying to set up a test that allows them to go into government. But I agree, an election. But I agree with you; it's all very tough. Where would I go if I were the Conservatives? And you say, well, how much of a story do they need on the auto sector? How much of a I don't think they need as much as an alternative as you think. I think they need the beat that we've talked about, the very quick in and out formula on Trump, so that they just roll that up. Like, look, in a broad context, here's our take, boom, boom, boom. Once they get that boom, 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 and they don't. And then I wouldn't get into macroeconomic strategy with respect to the auto sector versus other sectors, regions versus other regions. I would move very quickly if I were them to a place that's already pretty comfortable. And that is, but it's a little counterintuitive, and I think it would play well in public. And that is to start urging the government to do more on EI and skills and do stuff to help the workers. Go at it through that door and say, look, I am worried about the dude who just lost his shift in St. Thomas, and I'm worried about the family who just lost a breadwinner in Oshawa. I would focus on that, try to make some proposals that get some for some relief for those folks, and that's your auto strategy. So you don't have to take on the burden of being the mini government, because I do think there's lots of risk in that, and it ties to too many things that are hard to figure out. But you can be for those workers and get to that territory before the government does, and I think that would be smart.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, you guys, but I'm still not obvious to me where the space is between Carney and Trump on economics for the Conservatives.
I don't think the Conservatives need to win that battle. I think they just need to make it clear aware of it. They can still, if you go back to the last campaign, when the last 10 days or so, Trump kind of dropped off the radar. He wasn't talking about Canada. And what happened? We went up way in the polls, and Poilievre caught fire on his issues. His rallies were getting bigger. There was more excitement. And if you look at the election results, I was doing CBC radio that night. And they have this amazing system where we could track every riding in great detail, and you could see where the Conservatives were doing incredible on election night until the advanced polls came in, which were cast a week prior, and that's when everything got upset. But Conservatives won a lot of election day votes, a lot of them. And so I don't think you need to own the issue. You don't need to beat Carney on it. You just got to be on the field.
And I think I do think there's one thing that they have to, and this is why coming up with I make it sound so simple now because it's an ABC formula, and then you're allowed to not talk about it. But it's a little harder than that. But the one thing that they are going to have to confront is how loudly they go, no, we're not for, and this is what your point about Canadian business leaders, David, we're not for a path of renewed and even greater reintegration with the U.S., a CUSMA deal at any cost, a customs union if that's what they want, a kiss and, screw me on the weekend and don't call me during the week kind of deal. Sure, that's good enough for me. Like they're not going to, and that's what Jivani, I know we're going to talk about, is basically recommending. And I don't think the Conservatives can afford to be in that territory. I think that territory will be made impossible to hold by the actions that Trump is almost certain to take between now and June. Like, I think that's just going to get burned to cinders, that territory, and they should not go there. And they should figure out how to not go there and signal that early.
I just think that they need some. I'm not saying it needs to be bulletproof and comprehensive and all that, but they need some alternative theory, like about, are you just going to accept what Trump gives you? Are you waiting for something post-Trump? Because I can tell out there in the debate that the fight is gathering. The fight is being joined between those people who are talking about the pivot away from the United States and reducing independence, and those people who say, you're fucking crazy, right? We live right next door. This is not possible. Our economies are too integrated. There's a reason we can't sell to Europe. So I mean, I think that fight is being joined, but I think the Conservatives need an out that gives them an alternative to the Carney policy that does not imply accepting whatever the United States offers.
Hard though, because one, they have a bunch of Trump sympathetic folks in their party, which we've talked about ad nauseum, right, in the voter coalition. So they got to manage that. And that eventually, that's a nut you just have to crack. But beyond that, the most obvious and the most visible stream of argument against Carney, which they want to pick up on, a critique of Carney, is coming from those voices, all right, particularly Canadian business leaders. And I think they're going to look like fools in 3 months. I think they look like fools now, to be blunt, who are saying, hang on, like, I don't like the guy, and I don't like what's going on, and we don't want to be pushed around. But like, let's, like, we're going to buy jets other than the F-35s. Are we fucking nuts? Like, come on. Like, what are we doing here? We're gonna absolutely torch ourselves. And so it's not easy for the Conservatives. I mean, they're going to walk away from a good portion of their vote who is going to be upset by them not being in slipstream with Trump, and they're going to alienate the most obvious course of critics of Carney because they're going to refuse to echo them. But that's what they've got to do, because you've got to be guided by where the public is and where the public's going.
Well, and Fred, I think that's where the opportunity is going to lie also, because whenever Carney goes to the polls this spring, next fall, whenever it is, right, I think the economy is going to look weaker than when he started. And I think that the things he's been doing, if they're ever going to bear fruit, will not have borne fruit by that election campaign. And I think that there's going to be a lot of question marks about whether or not all this is going to really result in a stronger Canadian economy or a weaker Canadian economy. And to go back to our conversation about Stephen Harper, Mark Carney's done nothing to prepare us for a weaker economy. He's not been making a sacrifice pitch. He's been making a different way to win pitch, right?
Right.
So I think he's vulnerable if the Conservatives can find a way to play offense, but they can't play offense right now.
But I don't know if it's not offense to like go and try to peel liberal votes that are hot on this issue and make them go vote conservative. I think they need a way to be on the field, to be talking about the issue enough to alleviate fear that the Conservatives don't have a plan, that they okay, I think the Conservatives can take them on as well, but here are actually the other issues I really believe in, like affordability, crime, and the other things that I think they're champion. So it's either, we had record turnout last election, right? A lot of people came out. The NDP and the Bloc collapsed. If Carney was the only one in that election who could take on Trump, that was the story. If it gets some doubt in there, wait, maybe Poilievre can too. Maybe there's something there he can do. We don't necessarily need to steal that vote back to us. It can go back to the NDP and the Bloc, and that opens up the path for Poilievre to win. That's why I think it has to be nuanced what he does, and I don't think he needs to own the issue. I don't think he has to outperform Carney on this. I think he just has to alleviate some voters' fears that he doesn't have a plan on this.
It's a blizzard outside. Roads are closed. It's freezing and windy. But inside your home, it's normal. It's warm. Auto production lines continue humming. Cement plants keep producing. Energy is oxygen to them. That's natural gas, the province's best friend on such days, says our sponsor Enbridge Gas. Natural gas delivered by Enbridge Gas heats almost 75% of the homes in Ontario, and it shows up no matter the weather. The company's infrastructure runs underground, away from storms, ice, and natural disasters, moments when reliability matters. And this isn't new. Our sponsor, Enbridge Gas, has been doing this for 178 years. From powering Toronto's first gas-lit street lamps near St. Lawrence Market in the 1800s, to safely delivering energy to millions of homes and critical Ontario businesses today, steadily, reliably, safely. Reliability matters in a province that plans decades ahead. Reliability keeps the heat on and the production lines running. You can't run a full-time economy on part-time power. Enbridge Gas has reliably supplied generations of Ontario businesses the energy they need to succeed. And it still does, every single day. What if I suggested to you that one of the easiest things for him to do would be to go out there and recruit 2 or 3 people that look like they could fucking do this job? Like, they could be a finance minister, they could be a trade minister, they could walk into Washington and be impressive, right?
Yeah.
There are conservatives, small c conservatives in the country who fit that bill.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent if he could do that. Bring in some, there's already a strong caucus. He has some good members, but people to fit what you're saying, I don't think are really necessarily there. So if he can do that, and the Conservative Party made a rule change that I never thought would ever happen. having worked from the beginning of the party up until just a few years ago, they changed it where the leader can now appoint 8 candidates. So he could actually handpick and put them in good ridings. Again, that's something I've never ever expected the Conservative Party to do. They were, a grassroots party that I remember as director of political operations under
Yeah.
Harper, how we were insistent on how
Yeah.
the grassroots gets a pick. But he can do that now. He actually has the ability to recruit and place them where he wants. And that's absolutely what I think he should be looking for in candidates, or people that he can really show and bolster his team's credentials.
I think Mike DeYoung would be surprised to hear that this is a new thing, that the center controls nominations.
Yeah, yeah. It's a cleaner way to do it, I guess.
So, hey, our clipping today comes to us from Alex Boutillier of Global News, and it's about Jamil Jivani's trip down to Washington. And this is the part of it. He In a social media post Wednesday, Jivani said he had productive meetings with the White House and State Department, and he met with both his friend Vance and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And I think today he's expanded to say that he also met with President Trump. And so that was an unauthorized trip, in the sense that we're led to believe that he didn't ask or receive permission from the leader to go on this trip. So I'm curious about that. But I also, I'm not certain about to me, I'm not certain it's bad politics for him to have done this. I know that there's in some of my circles, there's a lot of derision about it. But I mean, it's sort of an obvious thing to try. I mean, I don't think people expect that his friendship changes the administration's policies, but I kind of had been thinking it was weird of him not to have a conversation about it. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, well, that would be true if he was saying to the Canadian population, I want to go speak to my old friend and try to persuade him that they're on the wrong wicket and there's a better path. That's not apparently what he's doing. He instead goes down there and then says, "Hey, I'm literally the messenger boy for the president of the United States. He wants to pass on that he loves all of Canada." And I just think he looks like a stooge. I think he looks like a fool. I think that, like, I have an unequivocal opinion on this. I think this guy is a grenade without a pin for the Conservatives and for the country. He's, auditioning for the role of Pétain, and I can't be condemning enough. I just think he was at least shrewd enough to write that op-ed that characterized it as a, kind of a fact-finding mission. He wants to be respectful and come back and report to all the appropriate authorities, both within his party and within the government. That's the wisest positioning he's had for this entire time at the very tail end. But his public statements are complete appeasement. He's explicitly saying, we are making mistakes to deal with others. We have not sufficiently explored the opportunities to cooperate and move forward with the United States. And I just think that is ice that is going to break in like the middle of March. And it is appeasement talk. It is absolutely untrackable with the Canadian population. And I think he believes it. And I think it's going to put, if he maintains it and intensifies it on Canadian soil for the next 2, 3, 4 months, I think it's going to put the Conservatives in a really awkward spot where they're going to have to say, pipe down. You're not speaking for us on this. And I just think he looks like a complete stooge.
Fred, if you're in Steve Outhouse's spot, did you want that trip to happen or not?
Look, as you guys are well aware, politics is a team sport, and you got to be operating as a team, particularly in today's day of age where it's so easy to communicate and to get messages out. So, no, I think it's if it's true that it was unauthorized, if the leader wasn't aware, that is problematic. That is someone going out on their own. When you're, in Ottawa, if you're out there trying to build bridges, but you're doing it by yourself, you could be confused. You're just building a plank. liberals are calling him a freelancer. I know there's some mix in the conservative world about, some are cheering him on, thinks it's great what he's doing. But some are quite skeptical about what this is about and what's he doing. Is it about him and getting building up his clout? But there's an opportunity, perhaps. I mean, we all knew the relationship during the election. There was articles being written about his relationship. And I'm curious if the government ever thought maybe he could be someone that they could work with or talk to, or if Poilievre was of the same mind, and whatever came of that, if anything. Did these discussions ever happen? But I think, I don't know Jamal Jivani. I don't think I've ever met him, but his reputation is one of a lone wolf. He doesn't necessarily work well with others. So I don't know what all's going to come of that and what more he's going to do. But if he wants to be influential, it's hard to be influential when your own leadership may not want that influence or really be a part of it.
Why would he have done it, Scott? Like, I mean, if we say it wasn't authorized by the leader's office, that means they didn't want it to happen. Wasn't authorized.
Or were they not aware? They may not have been aware.
It's unauthorized.
May not have been aware.
In that in and of itself, though, would be a thing. Like, why does the guy at this point want to create a problem inside? What's his angle?
Even if you were aware, I think you'd be loath to tell him, don't go. Like, it's a really hard conversation to have because the guy's history. And, every team he's been on, he's turned on. So that's a hell of a record. But they knew that when they enthusiastically embraced him and told everybody who said that and warned them that they were wrong and to go to hell.
You knew I was a snake when you took me in. How does that story go?
Yeah. Scorpion. But I don't want people to think that I do think my comment about him being a stooge and this is problematic for the Conservatives. I think I'm offering sincere analysis. Some people say, well, you're just being a partisan. The reason I don't agree with this, and I think it is a problem, is that I do think there's good politics in it, David. I think there's good politics in it for him. I don't think there's good politics in it for the Conservatives or for the country. I think there's a sizable portion of the country quaking in its boots, understandably, justifiably, who are anxious about where this is going and thinking, well, in the end of the day, we may end up just knuckling down. And Carney himself has had to go elbows down in spits and spurts all the time and may have to again on stuff. But the reason I think this is a problem, it's good politics for him because he's going to find at least 25% of the population going to cheer him on. He's going to find a good portion of conservatives who would cheer him on because they like the way he's aligning. And it's look, he can get things done and meetings done and he can move the ball in a way that the Carney guys can't and all that kind of stuff. So it's got like a kind of a narcotic appeal, a temporary narcotic appeal. But it leads to a specific and indisputable place, and that is saying yes to whatever shit deal they offer us and saying yes and ignoring the insults. And I think the insults are going to intensify as Trump starts to prepare for CUSMA negotiations. I think he's going to find it. He'll deem it to be in his negotiating interest to shit on Canada, to call Carney governor, to put up things that show the stars and stripes spread across Canada and say, like, we'll take what we want if you won't give us what we demand. And I just think that leads. So therefore, if you are a voice of this, you're in a place that's going to collapse in terms of public opinion support. So I think, why'd he do it? I think he thinks that right now it makes great sense for him, and you can see that there is going to be an immediate bump. But unless you want to be a vassal state, there is no medium to long-term political game here that makes sense.
Okay, so it's about him and his political future. Is this the show where we're supposed to tell the truth about politics? Is this we're supposed to tell the truth? He's too unattractive physically to be successful in politics. He's not going to be the leader of a political party.
Oh, I don't know if I'd agree with that. I don't know if his looks are. I'm not going to weigh in on
which
that
part.
one,
that he's too unattractive, or that he is unattractive. I mean, you got to break this down, Fred. I know it's day one, but come on.
Look. As soon as the election was over, he immediately put out a.
I can't believe you're going to dismiss this as not mattering. Of course, it matters.
I don't look. I think he's well spoken, and I'm not ever going to say if a guy looks good or bad. I just not can't do it. But I'll say
Oh, you
he
missed, yeah. Well, you missed all the heated rivalry
right.
sessions on this show. Yeah.
I guess so. I would say though, like he is organizing. Like he put out right after the election, he put out a at the time fairly controversial take on temporary foreign workers. He put out a petition right away, and it was data collection around the country, right? So he is building lists, he's doing stuff. And look, that's the new. A lot of people are doing that. He's not the only one, and not the only party that's doing that. So the ambition looks like it's there. But look, anyone can win any leadership race with the right message and the right tone when things go down that road. So I
Look,
would
he's
disagree
definitely
with
got.
you.
Yeah, I'm not going to get like super personal. It's not like I'm fucking Clark Gable, but he does have a kind of conservative Lex Luthor thing going. So I do think that's, we'll see how much that matters. Um, but I think
Scott, you and I have always known that we were too unattractive for politics, and even and it does have a low bar, but even we
we're
didn't make it. We didn't. Yeah.
we're too unattractive for podcasting. Let's be honest. Um, but I just think the fundamental aspect of this guy, and again, I just point to his past and his record of anywhere that he's worked in any team that he's taken part with. Working with this guy is like trying to roll up barbed wire, and good luck. I hope you got some strong gloves to wear because he's going to cut you.
Right. All right. It's time for Gordon Pinsent to bring in the Hey Yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Fred Delory, it's your first ever Hey You. What do you got?
Well, I'm going to give a hey you to Rob Lance, the new premier of Prince Edward Island, who ran a great campaign over the last few months. He stepped in as interim premier when Dennis King left, when Carney appointed him to Ireland, I guess it was, and he did the job incredibly well to the point where he had no plans to run for leader. But when every Islanders that he bumps into is asking you to take on the job permanently, he decided to do it, and he ended up winning the most votes ever in a leadership race in Prince Edward Island
Wow.
to do it. So it was a great result for him, and I think a great result for the island.
No kidding. Congratulations.
That's great.
All right, Scott, you want to go?
I want to ask Fred a quick question. Now, when you swoop in there, you're not from PEI, right?
I'm not from Nova Scotia, though. I can see it from my.
I know. That's where I was going. So does the Atlantic Canadian thing buy you some grace? Because I must say, I find Islanders are pretty hardcore. Are you from away? Like I get, it's sort of like nice to have you. Thanks. Go see the Anna Green Gables show. Buy as much shit as you like, and then fuck off. Like you're not from here. Did
That's
you know you got none of that?
No, I get a lot of that. That's 100%
Okay.
accurate. It's same in both parties. Even though I'm from Nova Scotia and can literally see PEI from my cottage. It's no, they look. They have a very unique culture, and I know politically, if you look around the country, we always say every place is unique, and there are a lot of unique places, but this is the most real. They like their politics their way, and they have a different way of doing it.
Well, congrats. Congrats to you because that must not have been an easy job. It looks like it was an awful successful effort. Well, David, I mean, our Hey Yous, I'm going to try to keep it short because I'll get emotional. Our Hey You is about our friend Ellie who passed away on the weekend. And I don't know how many people listening know Ellie Alboin. Probably lots and lots and lots of people who listen know Ellie well, either by reputation or knew him personally. But he was a good, close friend of ours. We worked with him in politics. We worked with him in business. We worked with him in an office for many years. Started out, obviously, as a force beyond measure and at CBC out of Montreal, then running the Parliamentary Bureau. So he gained all reputation. I wasn't plugged into Ellie back in those days. I came to know him in the late 80s, early 90s, and we worked together from that point on a whole variety of things. And, he and I worked together on communications issues for businesses and corporations we worked together with, worked on files together. We probably helped 4 or 5 different political leaders do debate prep. We teamed up on that. The two of us had a little formula we got going there on that. That was those are wonderful times. He was a fantastic advisor, obviously, to Paul and to Kathleen, that we worked together on those campaigns and others. He taught at Queen's University, taught a course on government communication, political communication, he which he dropped during COVID, and I got to pick up after COVID. So I feel like in some ways I'm carrying on his legacy a bit there. But all I'll say about him is he is renowned for being penetratingly intelligent. The guy who at the end of the meeting would say, "Let's just hang on a minute," and then he would roll out a rigorous analysis that would poke holes in the opinion of everyone without consideration for how powerful the people were whose opinions he might be punching holes in, which made him invaluable. He didn't just speak truth to power. He just he spoke it and spoke it and spoke it. And some people didn't appreciate the candor, but boy, those who did sure benefited from his counsel. And yeah, I don't. I mean, he might have been the most respected person I knew in the sense that almost anyone I knew who worked with him, felt that he was not just a source of real clarity when it came to communications and strategic and policy thinking, but moral clarity. And I know that sounds high stakes. It sounds like it's out of place on a podcast like this, but Ellie really was that. He had a clarity about what was right and what was wrong, and that's useful to have around the table, particularly when you're dealing with the greasy till of politics. And so, I'll miss him. If he wasn't the smartest, if you were with Ellie and he wasn't the smartest person in the room, you were in some kind of fucking room. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'll just pick up and add a few things. I mean, the biography is part of the CBC article about him, and other people will write about what the biography is. I just want to reinforce a couple of personal points, one of which is he is the smartest person I ever met. Mind is unbelievable. His ability to analyze a situation. There was nothing from the time that I met him, nothing I wanted to do of any importance that I didn't want him involved in, because it would be better. And he would make me look way better. You make so many fewer mistakes if you listen to Ellie than you do if you don't. The second thing I'd like to say about him is what you just said about character. When you're in politics and you're trying to manage your way through difficult situations, or you're trying to pull rabbits out of hats, it is very useful to be surrounded by somebody who has that moral clarity that you talked about. I think Mike Robinson was the first person to describe Ellie as wise to me, but it's a great word to describe him. He was very wise, and I'm not. So it was great to have that wisdom around. And lastly, everybody that knows Ellie knows that he was a crusty, curmudgeonly guy who delivered his advice without any honey. And it made a lot of people scared of him. But let me tell you, beneath that crusty exterior, it's nothing but love for the people that he loved. And if you had a problem, despite that crusty exterior, he was absolutely the person to go to help you get out of that problem, and he would help you get out of that problem. I don't have the professional career I have without Ellie Elboim. I wouldn't have whatever political success I've had without Ellie Elboim. I wouldn't even live at the lake I live at if it wasn't without Ellie Elboim. So my world's shattered in a big way this weekend. And Ellie, thank you for everything. All right. Fred, you didn't know Ellie very well, and you said you had a question or two.
Well, it's just the relationship and how you guys got to know him, because I didn't know him, but when I got off the plane from Charlottetown last night, my Twitter feed was exploded from both sides of the aisle, liberal and conservative, condolences. So we touched a lot of people. So I was just curious, how did you guys first get to meet this Ellie?
We were both at a what was then a small consulting boutique in Ottawa. Now it's a large firm called Earnscliffe. And he and I joined Earnscliffe at the same time in 1993, and Scott would have joined shortly after that at Earnscliffe, and that's largely where we got to know him. I'd had a couple interactions with him when he was CBC bureau chief. But it was at Earnscliffe that I got to know him, and then he and I were paired together as sort of public sector comms advisors. And everybody in Ottawa, every bureaucrat in Ottawa, wanted to hire Ellie because his reputation coming out of the CBC was so enormous that everybody said, I want this brain working on my file. So everybody in Ottawa was hiring Ellie, and he brought me along to every meeting. And I'm just a kid who, if I'm known at all, I'm known for being a political hack, right? And he, in meeting after meeting, transferred his authority and his gravitas to me. He would delegate to me in the meeting. He would defer to me in the meeting. He would bring me in a way that made those people respect me too. And when I say I wouldn't have had the career, he gave me a stature I would not have found on my own, and he did it by transferring his stature to me. Incredibly generous person.
My story is very similar. I was aware of who Ellie was a little bit just from working on the Hill in the late 80s, early 90s when I did as a summer student and so forth. And then we ended up working together at Earnscliffe, and then that lapped over into the political campaigns and world that we worked with him professionally, and then we kind of drew him in because we valued his advice and his counsel and his wisdom so much. We sort of drew him into the campaigns and political efforts that we got into. And he was something of a reluctant bride initially about that because he'd spent many years as a journalist, and he sort of thought, well, that partisan world isn't something. So he never really was a partisan. He was someone who would only participate in campaigns on the basis of personality. Was I comfortable with this person? Did I consider them worthy of my time? And all the things that David said about, the stature in a city that was, I mean, it's still a small city, Ottawa, and it's still a small political community. But in the early 90s, when you're a kid in your mid-20s, early to mid-20s, and someone like Ellie carts you into a room to meet with people, the glow that he cast on me was huge. And, and I just, unimaginable amounts that I learned from him.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Godspeed to him. And to his family. We all love you. Right. Okay. Thank you. That's a Curse of Politics for this week. I think we get Jordan back from the wilds of Costa Rica next week, so we'll have a full complement. Fred's got one under his belt. I hope you felt okay about it, Fred. And I'm sorry about that appearance thing. If that was over the line for you, I don't know.
Just threw me for a loop, but yeah.
Well, it's things you think about when you're recruiting candidates.
No, it's a fair question.
All right. Thank you to all the sponsors who made this possible. I know that you listeners out there sometimes begrudge the number of them, but I don't. So suffer through it, and we'll be back next week with more of the Curse of Politics. See you then.
With the hair for men. What is it? The Club for Hair
Club for Men?
Hair Club for Men as our brand new title sponsor. No doubt.
Well, nobody more than you would need them, Scott.